we get started in earnest, I just want to say thank you to everyone. We've recently went over 200 subscribers, and I know we're just a tiny, itty-bitty, irrelevant little community, but even still, it was really nice to see. So I just wanted to say thank you for everyone who's been with us since day one, for those of you who came on recently, and everyone in between. Anyways, on to the topic at hand. We've had a couple leaks in the last month or so I figured it might be a good idea to read into what they might actually mean in the context of what we should expect in the future. So with that said, let's jump right into it. Also, get comfy and grab a glass of milk.
Wow.
Suppose let's start with the newer and far less interesting leak of the two. The fact that Manslabe and Morslaib, also known as the two wounds of the Warhammer world, are present in Troy's game files. Now, at first blush, this might sound completely irrelevant. I mean, they're just leftover files, right? Well, pump the brakes, because it's worth noting that Warhammer 2 itself doesn't actually have those moons in the game files, which is more than a little peculiar. It's technically possible that they were left in from all the way back in Warhammer 1, but even in that game, they were never actually used in gameplay, only in cinematics. It should also be noted, nothing else was left in that wasn't used. There's no units or faction flags or anything along those lines left in, so it would be a little odd that of everything, the moons, and not only both of them, but even the variants of them, were left in. And while Manslabe might have pulled in Double Duty as just a placeholder moon when they were making the skyboxes, it certainly doesn't explain Morslaib, which is an unnatural green moon with a skull face, or a more jack-o'-lantern looking face in the variant that they modified. So just what the heck's going on here? I've seen a few theories regarding updating skyboxes for Total Warhammer 3, and then this ties in with the CA statement about wanting to update the battle maps quite well. As we said, neither moon makes an appearance in the skybox for either game, so perhaps Troy is being used as a testbed for this. I've also seen suggestions that it perhaps ties into the expected Beastman rework, given how prominent a role Morslaib plays in Beastman culture. This particular chunk of news also ties into our next leak quite well, but we'll get into that in just a moment. Unfortunately, I suspect both theories are wrong, and the truth is perhaps a little more mundane and uninspiring. Troy was literally built on the bones of Total Warhammer, and while most Warhammer assets make no sense to pull Double Duty, a moon is something that can be used as a good enough state for a skybox during testing. Aha! You scream into your monitor. But that doesn't explain why Morslaib is both in the game and modified. And sure, at first blush, that is a weird inclusion, unless they were playing around with it to see what effect it would have on the maps themselves, just to use it as sort of a vague asset. I'm not saying this won't have any effect on Total Warhammer 3, but I am definitely not ready to say this for sure means night maps are going to be a thing in Total Warhammer 3. Alright, so maybe that first result kind of let you down. Maybe you were hoping for something a bit more grandiose. Well, luckily for you, I think the second leak is actually a lot more interesting, which is ironic because I see significantly less people talking about it. When the last two DLCs launched, they included diplomacy dialogue for the Wood Elves, Beastmen, and Chaos. Now, already I've seen implications for what this could mean, and virtually all of them are valid, but we'll hit that later. What's especially interesting to me is that this was discovered on July 4th, which is before the Wood Elf DLC or Savage Edition were either announced. I don't think the folks who found this out realized actually what they found at the time. To clarify, Imrek, Grom, Eltherion, Snikch, and Malus Darkblade all possess two unique extra diplomacy greetings compared to other legendary lords in the series. They all have unique dialogues for dealing either with the Wood Elves, and they all have a set of dialogue options that trigger when dealing with the Beastmen or Warriors of Chaos, whereas Game 2 Legendary Lords typically only possess unique dialogues for Vortex races. This actually gets a little more interesting too, as Snikch and Malus Darkblade both have unique dialogue options for the previously mentioned trio, but they do not have unique dialogue options for the Greenskins. There's a unique implication of this that I'll touch upon later, so just keep this fact in your head. Another little detail of the fact was the fact that the Vampire Coast have unique dialogues for the Vampire Counts, who of course never did end up making it into the Vortex campaign. Now, obviously the first thing about this is, clearly the last couple DLCs were already designed to account for the upcoming Wood Elf DLC. While it doesn't tell us who the second member is, something I personally found interesting is that Imrek is super biased against the Wood Elves, which at first made me think of Draika, but then I realized he specified the Azrai. While the Wood Elves technically include forest spirits in their roster, Azrai is a term that specifically refers to actual elves themselves. So now that I realize that, I suspect Imrex is just a racist, and we will have a proper Wood Elf Legendary Lord for the main Legendary Lord in the pack. Now, obviously the other side of this is that there's now unique dialogue for the Beastmen and Warriors of Chaos. Again, the timing of this is very interesting since the Savage Edition was announced late last month as well. CA is making a version of the game with those two races specifically, and then adding dialogue specifically for them to the Vortex campaign. I'm trying really hard not to overhype this, but damn, that seems pretty open and shut in my eyes. Now, this might be nothing. It might be a simple Vortex drop-in for them without a unique campaign. It could be many things. But regardless, it seems that these two are getting looked at for something in the near future. There were also some interesting details hidden behind the scenes, as I said. I briefly mentioned the Vampire Coast and the Vampire Count unique dialogues, but it bears repeating. I think it's pretty safe to say that the initial Vampire Count rework included plans to get them into the Vortex campaign. Remember, the Vampire Counts got the rework at the exact same time as the Vampire Coast did, but in their case, all it did was add in the Bloodlines mechanic, and they remained exclusive to the Mortal Empires. The dialogue for the Coast would have made them available somewhere in the New World, which means at least one Legendary Lord was being looked at to put them into the Vortex campaign at some point. However, the bigger piece of hidden intel to me is that the Wood Elves update has been in development longer than the Greenskins has. This isn't to say that they've been actively developed for longer than the Greenskins or anything. It's almost assuredly not the case that they were being coded before the Greenskins were, but that the plan to update them precedes the plan to update the Greenskins. I don't want to get my hopes up over nothing, but the fact that they've been planning this for so long and looking at how in-depth CA seems to be going with the rework just according to the tease, I have super high hopes for this DLC. So there you have it. To recap, the next DLC appears to be an actual Wood Elf Legendary Lord and someone else, and the Beastmen and or Chaos seem to be getting something in the near future. The Vampire Counts were considered for the Vortex at some point in time, and the Wood Elf DLC has been planned out for a long while now. I'm actually going to do a part 2 for these leaks next week with some more implications about the Beastmen and Chaos side of this, so stay tuned for that. As always, I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.